If you have very few friends, there's a sentence you've probably heard your entire life: you should get out more. But what if the truth is far more uncomfortable for everyone else? What if the reason you walk alone isn't weakness, but awareness? Psychology doesn't say you're broken. It says you're different. And once you see why, you'll never look at loneliness the same way again. Here's the tension most people miss. Society worships popularity, more contacts, more group chats, more noise. So when someone chooses silence, people assume something must be wrong. But hidden psychology tells a different story. A quieter story, one that makes a lot of people uneasy, because it suggests that some minds simply refuse to play the game. Let's start with the first rare trait. You have an unusually low tolerance for anything fake, and your brain detects it instantly. The forced smiles, the rehearsed personalities, the subtle manipulation hiding behind jokes, you feel it before you can explain it. And once you feel it, your nervous system pulls back. Most people ignore these signals just to belong. You don't. That's not arrogance. That's perception. Research in self-awareness shows something unsettling. As people become more psychologically attuned, their tolerance for inauthentic behavior collapses. Small talk starts to feel heavy. Polite lies feel loud. Being around people who perform instead of exist actually drains your energy. So you choose solitude, not because you hate people, but because you refuse to betray your own intuition just to fit in, and that choice quietly isolates you. But that's only the surface. The second trait goes deeper. You crave depth the way others crave attention. You're not avoiding relationships. You're avoiding shallow ones. Conversations about nothing feel like a waste of consciousness. You want ideas, motives, meaning. You want to know why people are the way they are, what drives them, what scares them, what they're running from. And when a conversation never reaches that level, your mind disengages. Psychology calls this a deep processing orientation. Your brain doesn't skim life, it dives. That's why group settings feel unsatisfying. They move too fast. They stay too shallow. So instead of collecting dozens of connections that mean nothing, you wait, sometimes for years, because one real connection is worth more than a room full of noise. And waiting quietly looks a lot like having no friends at all. Now, here's where it gets even more misunderstood. The third trait has nothing to do with social skill. It has everything to do with energy. Your nervous system is highly sensitive to stimulation. Social interaction costs you more than it costs others. Every tone shift, every facial expression, every emotional undercurrent, you process all of it, constantly. That depth comes with a price. After being around people, you don't just feel tired, you feel emptied. Psychology refers to this as high social sensitivity. Extroverts recharge through interaction. You recharge through absence. Solitude isn't loneliness for you. It's recovery, but from the outside, this looks cold, distant, uninterested, and slowly, people stop inviting you, not realizing your silence was never rejection. It was survival. And just when people think they've figured you out, there's a fourth trait that flips the entire story. You don't need constant validation. Your sense of worth isn't outsourced to likes, approval, or social proof. You can sit alone with your thoughts without panicking. You create meaning internally. Psychology calls this low social dependency, and it's rare. You don't need a crowd to feel real. You don't need an audience to feel alive. That independence makes others uncomfortable, because it exposes how much they rely on external approval. So they label you antisocial. But the truth is far more threatening. You're self-contained. And that changes everything. This isn't damage, it's adaptation. A silent recalibration that raises your standards, sharpens perception, and quietly filters who deserves access to your inner world over time. But there's one final reason your circle is small, and it's the most powerful one of all. Because something in your past taught your brain to be careful. And once trust breaks, the mind never opens the same way again. There's a moment most people never see. A moment that happens quietly, usually years before you realize your circle is small. It's the moment trust breaks. And once it happens, your brain rewires itself without asking for permission. This is the fifth rare trait. Your mind learned caution the hard way. For many people with very few friends, there was an experience that changed how they relate to others forever. Betrayal, emotional neglect, being surrounded by people who smiled publicly and harmed privately. Psychology shows that when trust is violated deeply enough, the brain shifts into protection mode, not paranoia. Protection. You don't rush connections anymore. You observe. You test consistency. You watch how people behave when there's nothing to gain. And this creates what psychologists call a high trust threshold. Most people never even notice this process happening. They just feel it as distance, as hesitation, as a quiet voice that says, not yet. From the outside it looks like isolation. On the inside, it's discernment. Here's the twist most people don't expect. This trait doesn't make you colder, it makes you safer. Your brain is no longer optimized for fast bonding. It's optimized for accurate bonding. That means fewer connections, but stronger ones. It also means long periods where you appear alone. And that's where misunderstanding grows. Hidden psychology reveals something uncomfortable here. Many people confuse accessibility with warmth. If you're not immediately open, they assume you're closed off. If you don't overshare, they assume you don't care. But your mind doesn't open randomly anymore. It opens intentionally, and intention takes time. Now step back and look at the full picture. You're not someone with no friends. You're someone with high standards, deep processing, emotional sensitivity, strong independence, and a carefully guarded trust system. That combination is rare. And rarity often looks like isolation before it looks like clarity. You see through fake behavior. You crave depth over noise. Social interaction costs you more energy than it gives. You don't rely on validation to feel whole, and you don't hand out trust without evidence. None of these are flaws, but together they create a life path that's very different from the mainstream. This is why school never explained this to you, because systems are built for averages, not outliers. And if your mind doesn't fit neatly into social expectations, the world labels you instead of understanding you. But here's the most important reframe. Walking alone for a season doesn't mean you'll always walk alone. It means your mind is selective about who gets to walk beside you. And when someone finally does, it's not casual. It's meaningful. It's rare. It's real. Psychology shows that people like you don't form many connections, but the ones you do form tend to be deeper, longer lasting, and more authentic than average. You don't bond over convenience, you bond over alignment. And alignment takes time to find. So if you've ever wondered whether something is wrong with you because your phone is quiet, because your weekends are silent, because you don't have a group the way others do, understand this. Silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's space. Space for awareness. Space for growth. Space for a mind that refuses to settle for shallow connection just to avoid being alone. And here's the final tension. The very traits that isolate you early in life often become the traits that give you clarity, stability, and emotional strength later on. The crowd thins, the noise fades, and suddenly, what once felt like loneliness starts to feel like peace. That's why the people with the strongest inner worlds are often misunderstood first. If this video felt like it was describing you a little too accurately, that's not an accident. Hidden psychology exists to explain the parts of you that were never explained growing up. And if you stay curious, the next realization might change how you see yourself forever.